So our guest speaker today is a hug mobster armed with love. And I know that to be true because I'm one of her, I guess, henchmen, having been involved with mobstering many, many years ago at 30th Street Station. It was an absolutely wonderful time. Edie Weinstein is a social worker, and she's a career journalist, and she is an author. And as I mentioned, she's a hug mobster. She's a speaker. She's a Reiki master. She does PR. She's done a TEDx talk. She's done all kinds of stuff. And she's amazingly good at hugging. So please join me in welcoming my fellow hug mobster, Edie Weinstein.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm thrilled to be here. And I'm grateful to be here among so many other wonderful huggers. I wish that I could be there in person. I think the last time was pre-pandemic when I presented there, and there were lots of hugs. You are blessed to be part of a very affectionate community. So I'm hoping that during our time together, you'll be able to feel hugged through my words as well. Raise your hand if you experienced a hug today, other than from yourself, from another living, breathing being. Okay. According to Virginia Satir, who was a psychologist, we need 4 hugs a day just for survival, 8 hugs a day for maintenance, and optimally 12 hugs a day for growth. Most people I know don't experience 12 hugs a day. I'm one of the fortunate few right now because I watch my grandchildren 5 mornings a week. I've got a 1-year-old granddaughter, almost 1-year-old granddaughter, Lucy, and a 3-year-old grandson, Dean, and they are amazing huggers. And one of the rules that we've shared with them, that my son and daughter-in-law, and that I've shared with them, is that you don't even have to hug us if you don't want to. So I when I leave, I'll say, would you like a hug? And sometimes Dean will say no. And I start to walk out the door and he'll say, Bubby, come back, come back. Now, for those who don't know, Bubby is Yiddish for grandmother. Come back, come back. And then he'll do it on his own terms, which is probably the most enjoyable type of hugs, is when people do it on their own terms. And I have a number of rules when it comes to hugging. Number 1, ask first. Accept no as gracefully as yes. Hug heart to heart. So when I hug people, it's left side to left side. And I often put my hand on the back of their head, and it feels very maternal from what I've heard from other people that I've hugged. And then the 4th is let the other person be the first one to let go. And that's been a learned practice. Now, I grew up in a family where hugs were plentiful. Nobody left our house or entered our house without a hug, including our friends. My parents or my friends knew that they could experience hugs by consent from my parents. And I thought that's how everybody's family was. And I learned later on that that's not true. A lot of people sadly grew up in homes where hugs and consensual, nurturing touch was either absent, it was sexual, it was coercive, like, oh, come on, go hug grandma when you don't feel like hugging grandma. Or it was just not comfortable. And as a consent educator, as a therapist, I'm also an interfaith minister. And as Bill mentioned, and I'll tell the story in a little bit about hug mobsters, I believe in teaching people that no one touches you without your permission. And when I hug friends, even people that I've hugged for years, I'll say, would you like a hug? And they'll say, of course I would. Why do you even ask? And I tell them consent, that's huge. And we need to have body autonomy. So a lot of the #MeToo movement, a lot of what we're experiencing now in the world by way of inappropriate touch could be healed, could be prevented if people only asked first. And when Bill was talking about hug mobsters, this is how a lot of my, I would call it a mission, a passion, a calling got started. Valentine's Day weekend of 2014, I brought a group of friends to 30th Street Station. Bill was there, Dave was there, and I don't know if anybody else from this direct community was there, but a number of my friends from I live near Doylestown, from my community were there. And I think there were a dozen of us. And I deliberately chose February 15th the day after Valentine's Day, because I wanted people to understand that hugs and love were not just one day of the year and not just for romantic couples, that love is for everybody. And I lost count. We didn't have a clicker or anything, but I estimate that within the hour that we were there, we hugged at least 200 people. And it was an extraordinary experience. Bill can vouch for that, that it was heart opening. It was a surprise to a lot of people. It was a free hugs flash mob where we unleashed ourselves on the train station, totally unexpected. And actually afterward, a police officer, I don't know if you were there for this, Bill, but a police officer approached me and said, you really should have had a permit for this. And I said, we weren't soliciting. We weren't expecting anybody to do anything. We were offering. And I said, it would not have been a flash mob if we had to have a permit and it had to be planned. So I said, you're not going to arrest us, are you? He said, not this time, but if you do it again. And I asked him for a hug and he said, no. So one of the people that we met there was an Iraq war vet. And this story has stayed with me. But were you there for this interaction? The gentleman approached some of us and said he was the only survivor of his platoon and he had survivor's guilt. And he thought about ending his life because he was so depressed. He said, until I met you people, because you give me hope, can I join you? And of course I cried. And it's a story that I tell all the time. Now, I probably would not recognize this man if I saw him, but my heartfelt prayer is that he went on to live a full, rich, purposeful life because of our interactions. So you never know who you interact with, heart to heart, hug to hug, and you're going to make a difference in each other's lives. So after the event, friends started calling us hug mobsters, flash mob, hug mob. And I said, ooh, mobsters, ooh, ick, it felt too much like violent, and we weren't part of the mafia. And I said, what if we add the tagline, armed with love? And a friend of ours who was there, Greg Campese, is an artist, and he made us t-shirts with this kind of little symbol, little heart with hands. And that became our logo of sorts. And I have signs that when I do the free hugs thing, I carry the sign around with me with the arms. And a friend, and I haven't remembered who it was that started calling me this, the mother hugger. And I wear that name proudly. So fast forward, and between that day and February, June, my life changed dramatically. On June 12th of 2014, on the way home from the gym, I had a heart attack. I was 55 years old, totally out of the blue. And as part of my cardiac rehab, I did a lot of walking around Doylestown. And I thought, why don't I combine the hugging with the walking? Because hugs are heart friendly, cardiac friendly, emotional heart friendly. So I started doing free hug strolls. And some of them were other friends joined me. Some of them were just solo. And I estimate that between then and now, I've hugged several thousands of people in this part of the world. In Canada, I was up there a few years ago visiting friends. And then in May of 2018, I hugged my way across Ireland. And it was just a remarkable experience. And then came the pandemic and everything shut down. And I had this horrible feeling and I thought the question is, what if we could never hug again? And I had one of what I call God-versations. And I said, how is this possible that you could create people hardwired for touch and then deprive us of it? And I had a dream at the beginning of the pandemic where we could hug back to back or back to front, like spooning. And that gave me hope. And I went for 11 weeks without hugging another living being. My grandson had just been born a few months earlier, and I had helped to take care of him those first few months. So I couldn't see him. I couldn't see my son and daughter-in-law, no friends, no family. I live alone. So I experienced what I would call depression. For me, I'm not inclined toward depression or anxiety, but it felt like that. Having been a therapist for many years, I knew what depression looked like. So I did what I could to hug myself, to hug trees, to visualize hugs, to wrap myself in blankets, to hug this pillow. And somehow, like the rest of us, I survived. The first other living sentient being that I hugged, even before my grandson, was my cousin Jody's dog, Maddie. Maddie is a chocolate lab. And like most big dogs, she thinks she's a lap dog. So I went to visit Jody that summer of 2020, and we were sitting more than the requisite 6 feet away. We're sitting like 20 feet away from each other. And Maddie kept running back and forth between us. And she was muddy. And I didn't care. She jumped onto my lap and I hugged her and I cried. And I thought, all right, that's the first step. And then shortly after that, I came to visit my son and daughter-in-law. And the first time I held my grandson again, I wore a mask, and, KN95 mask. I wore a blanket around me. I had lathered up my arms with, the gel, and waited for it to dry before I held him. And I cried again. And shortly afterward, I started spending more time there. Now, as we're speaking, 3 years later, I've casually returned to hugging. I haven't stood on a street corner with the sign again, but in May and then in June are Pride Fests in the area. So I definitely will be part of that. And the other thing that I do regarding hugs is free mom hugs. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but there's a woman in Oklahoma City who created them because her son, who's gay, came out to her, and she was a devout Christian, and it felt like it was in conflict with her spiritual beliefs. And she had a conversation and said, how can you ask me to choose between you and my son? And the response was, you do not have to make that choice. So he invited her to a Pride Fest, and she made up a sign that said, or a button that said, free mom hugs. And during her time there, she hugged people whose parents didn't hug them when they came out. So Sarah, her name is Sarah Cunningham, created this movement called Free Mom Hugs. And they're also free dad hugs, by the way. So I'm part of that tribe as well. And I've been to, excuse the voice, I'm getting over laryngitis. I've been to Pride Fests wearing that sign and have people cry in my arms because of the same experience that the people had with Sarah. The other thing I want to encourage people to do is find ways, if you're not comfortable with hugging, to hug yourself, and maybe to ask yourself what is getting in the way of allowing that sense of heart-to-heart consensual intimacy in. Because hearts grow, hearts heal, but hugs themselves are healing. And, it's a remarkable experience because I've also found that hugs are my branding. People send me all kinds of memes that have to do with hugs. They send me songs about hugs. I connected with the gentleman that created the Free Hugs movement. His name is Juan Man. He lives in Australia, and Juan Man is actually a pseudonym for one man. So if you haven't had the chance to hear his story, look online, and it's MANN. Back in the 1980s, I think, I was introduced to a book called A Book of Hugs. And recently a friend gave me this book called More Hugs. And it's a way of encouraging people to get creative around hugging. So as we end, I think I've got like another minute or so. Phil, is that correct? Okay. I want to share a song with you that I offered during my TEDx talk. Now, the talk was called Overcoming the Taboo of Touch, if you want to look it up on YouTube. And it was a song that was written by singer-songwriter Fred Small. And it's called the Hug Song. Now, if you don't know it, look it up again, Fred Small Hug Song. And the story is about either a psychiatrist or a psychologist that worked in a psych hospital. And he got fired for hugging his patients, even though he did it by consent. And I'm going to share the chorus with you as a call and response. So if you can unmute yourselves for this, when I sing, I want to hug, I invite you to sing it back to me. Ready? I want to hug.
Wanna hug.
Wanna hug.
When we say hello, I want to hug.
Wanna hug.
Say hello. I want to hug.
When it's time to go, you don't have to sing that part. I want to hug.
I wanna hug.
Hug.
Cause I want you to know I'm awfully fond of you. I want to hug.
Wanna hug.
Hug.
What a wonderful feeling. Want to hug.
Wanna hug.
To feel you squeeze and want to hug.
Wanna hug.
Hug.
Certainly seems like the natural thing to do. So I invite you now to wrap your arms around yourself and remember the last hug you experienced. And imagine holding that person and breathing in that feeling. And then imagine a hug that you've been craving, someone that you may not have seen in a while, or someone that may have passed, and just hold that person in your heart. Thank you.